The Lord of the Rings doesn't begin with triumph, it begins with a failure. A king stands over his enemy, victorious. The Dark Lord lies defeated, his body broken, his weapon destroyed. And in that moment, the dread chance to end evil forever, Isildur chooses pride. He keeps the ring, and Middle-earth begins to die again. This moment is more than a plot point, it's the axis on which Tolkien's entire legendarium turns. The failure to destroy the ring is not an isolated mistake, it's the echo of something older. Tolkien's narrative architecture is built on deep time, a concept borrowed from geology, but applied here to mythology. It refers to history imagined on a vast, almost incomprehensible scale, not decades or centuries, but millennia. Ancient empires, forgotten gods, languages spoken by no one living, and yet they still matter. They matter because Middle-earth is not static backdrop, it's a wounded world, alive with memory. Every ruin, every relic, every half-remembered song is part of a long, slow story, still unfolding. In this world the present is shaped, even haunted, by the weight of what came before. Tolkien was not just a storyteller, he was a philologist, a scholar of language and myth. He didn't write Middle-earth as a setting, he wrote it as a palimpsest, a manuscript layered with old texts beneath the visible one. Beneath every page of The Lord of the Rings, you can feel other stories pressing upwards. These are not footnotes, they're the soul of the world. This historical layering is more than literary world building, it is thematic infrastructure. In Tolkien's universe, the past is never inert, it demands reckoning. Tolkien once said that mythology could convey truths beyond the reach of reason. He wasn't interested in escapism. In that light, the Silmarillion isn't a prequel, it's a ghost text, never fully explained within The Lord of the Rings, but always present. It gives shape to shadows and weight to wonder. This is the aesthetic of ruin and memory, a world where statues crumble in silent forests, where broken swords still carry power, where songs recall names no longer spoken. Tolkien's prose sustains its atmosphere through deliberate stylistic choices, archaisms, elegy, and poetic cadence. It's not just about what happened, it's about how it feels to live in a world that remembers too much. In this way, The Lord of the Rings is not simply a fantasy adventure. It's a meditation on historical consciousness. The heroes are not just warriors and wanderers, they're witnesses, interpreters, inheritors of wounds they did not cause, but must still try to heal. This is what shapes the story we are about to follow. Not a clean slate, but a cracked and aging foundation. Not a rising dawn, but a long twilight. But before we can look at the consequences of Isildur's foolishness, we must understand how the story began. Before mountains, before moons, before Middle-earth, there was music. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, but music as origin. This is the Ainur Lindale, the music of the Ainur. The first song, the first movement, in that long symphony of Arda's history. It is Tolkien's cosmogony, and it begins not in silence or chaos, but in harmony. At the center of this myth stands Eru Ilúvatar, the One. He's not a god of thunder or war, he does not shape with his hands or speak the world into being. Instead he creates through music, through the act of shared beauty. From this thought come the Ainur, angelic beings who sing the themes he gives them. It is through their collective song that the world is born. This idea sets Tolkien apart from nearly every other fantasy author. Creation here is not forged by fire, nor seized in conquest. It is composed. It is art. And like all art, it is vulnerable. Among the Ainur is Melkor, the most powerful of them all, gifted, curious, ambitious, and unsatisfied. Melkor begins to weave his own melodies into the divine music. He wants to innovate, to create new harmonies of his own design, but his additions clash with the others. His music turns to dissonance, not because he is unskilled, but because he refuses to submit to the unity of the whole. This is where the shadows enter the song. Melkor's discord doesn't destroy the music, but it wounds it. And in response, Ilúvatar does not erase the dissonance, he answers it. He weaves Melkor's defiance into a new theme, deeper and more sorrowful than before, and still beautiful. This is the first statement of core truth in Tolkien's mythos. Evil does not create, it corrupts. It distorts what already exists. It mimics beauty but cannot generate it. This idea is not unique to Tolkien. It echoes Augustinian theology, in which evil has no independent existence. It is privation, a twisting of good. But Tolkien doesn't express this through dry doctrine. Melkor's rebellion isn't just an act of pride, it's a refusal to harmonize. And in doing so he changes the world, not its destiny, but its shape. When the music is finished, Ilúvatar shows the Ainur what they have sung. He gives their song material form, Arda, the world. Many of the Ainur descend into it, becoming the Valar, godlike stewards who shape the world's continents, skies and waters. But they find that the world is already bent. Even before they begin their work, they must contend with Melkor's interference. His discord has scarred creation itself. So the world begins not perfect but already wounded. The mountains are too tall, the seas are too deep, the seasons clash. The struggle of the story begins here, not with a fall but with a flaw born of beauty turned inward. And yet Ilúvatar does not abandon the world. He tells the Ainur, "And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me." Even rebellion is not beyond his design. Even evil can be answered. This is not cheap optimism. Tolkien does not promise that all things will be made well, only that no act of evil lies outside the possibility of redemption. It is a theology of hope through endurance, not through erasure. This is the cosmology that undergirds the Lord of the Rings. The wars of men and elves, the fading of magic, the temptation of the ring, all of it unfolds in a world that began with music and was broken by pride. That's what makes Tolkien's mythology feel not just deep, but alive. The Ainur's music still echoes through the plains of Rohan, the ruins of Gondor, the forests of Lothlórien. The struggle of good and evil is not an abstract battle, it's a dissonance in a song still being written. Creation begins with song, but pride turns music into noise. And in Arda, the world shaped by that original harmony, the first note of discord does not fade, it deepens, it thickens, it takes form. That form is Melkor. He does not enter Arda as servant, but as a conqueror. While the other Ainur descend with reverence to tend the world they have sung into being, Melkor arrives with intent, not to nurture but to dominate. He calls the world his own, he seeks to reshape it in his image, not out of duty, but out of desire. Melkor wants the flame imperishable, the secret fire of Ilúvatar, the power to give life. But it is not his to take, it resides with Ilúvatar alone. Beyond the reach of even the greatest of Ainur, Melkor can manipulate, he can twist, but he cannot create. And so in his frustration he begins to destroy. He freezes the waters that were meant to flow, he shatters mountains raised by other hands. He dims light, bends land, turns beauty into shadow. This is not simple vandalism, it is reordering. Melkor's pride manifests as the need to be the center of all things. The world must not reflect the will of Ilúvatar, it must reflect his. At the heart of this campaign he raises Utumno, a great fortress in the north, cold and terrible. It is here he gathers the first spirits of rebellion. Some are seduced by his power, others are coerced, but one by one they fall into orbit around him. Among them, a being who will come to be known as Sauron. Melkor plants the first seed of tyranny, a kingdom not of peace or law, but of domination. His reign is not yet total, but its shape is clear. Power through fear, unity through subjugation. This is the first battle of Arda, not just of armies but of intentions. The Valar rise to contest Melkor's claim, what was meant to be a world of harmony scarred by war before its first full dawn. Melkor's corruption spreads like fire, touching everything, mountains, winds, creatures, even time itself. The geography of Arda becomes unstable, seasons fall into chaos, and yet the Valar continue to labor, shaping what they can, mending what he breaks. It is in the aftermath of this chaos that something new stirs. They are called the firstborn, the elves. Unlike the Valar or the Ainur, the elves are not born from the music. They are direct creations of Ilúvatar, summoned into being by his will alone. No heralds, no announcements, they simply awaken, quiet, luminous, curious, beneath the stars. And Melkor is the first to find them. What he does remains partly hidden, even in the deepest lore, but what is known is this: he fears them, and so he acts. Among the elves there are whispers of those taken in the night, of those changed. This is where the orcs first appear. Tolkien revised the origin many times, and never fully settled it. Each version raises its own questions, but the most widely accepted and perhaps most tragic is this: that Melkor captured elves, tortured them, and twisted them into creatures of hatred. If this is true, then the orcs are not born, they are broken. They're not Melkor's creation, but its defilement of another's. The elves, meant to be the first voices of Ilúvatar's hope, become in some the chorus of his enemy. And this is the true horror of Melkor's dominion. After his defeat in the first battle of Arda, the Valar descend into the depths of Utumno, and there in the shadows of his own making, Melkor is captured. It is Tulkas, the warrior of the Valar, who subdues him with the chain of Angainor, and Melkor is dragged back to Valinor. In humiliation, there Manwe, his brother and chief among the Valar, renders judgment. A long incarceration in the halls of Mandos. Time passes, and eventually mercy is shown. Melkor is released. He returns not with chains, but with words, a mask of humility, a false repentance. And this time his weapon is not power, but trust. Soon after he slips away from Valinor and seeks out an ally, not another spirit, the corrupted Maya, but something older, something deeper, a being of pure hunger. Her name is Ungoliant. She is not precisely defined, not beast and god, but an elemental shadow, a spirit of devouring. She consumes not out of malice or greed, but out of instinct. She exists to feed, and Melkor promises her feast. Together they commit one of the most devastating acts in Tolkien's mythology. They destroy the two trees of Valinor, Telperion and Lorelin. These are not just trees, they're the source of light before the sun and moon. They are beauty made visible, time made luminous. Their light infuses the world with divine memory, with order, with rhythm. They're living symbols of harmony. Ungoliant drinks their light, she drains them dry. Melkor strikes them down and she devours what remains. The world falls into darkness. Not night, but blackness. Light itself is eaten. This is no mere act of vandalism, it is cosmic negation, the obliteration of remembrance and radiance. Evil in its truest form does not simply destroy, it uncreates, it devours meaning itself. What was once sacred is now void. But not all the light is lost. A spark remains, contained in 3 radiant jewels, the Silmarils. Created by Fëanor, the most gifted of the elves, the Silmarils preserve the final light of the 2 trees. They are objects of astonishing beauty, but also of obsession. Even the Valar revere them, and Melkor wants them. He returns to Valinor under cover of darkness and steals the Silmarils, killing Fëanor's father in the process. Then he flees to Middle-earth, returning to the north and taking a new name, Morgoth, the black foe of the world. But it is not the theft itself that unravels the world, it is the response. Fëanor, consumed by grief and fury, swears a terrible oath, that he and his sons will pursue the Silmarils to the end of the world, defying friend, foe, and even the Valar. This is the oath of Fëanor, a vow that binds not just their fate, but the fate of their people. The flight of the Noldor, the first great rebellion of the elves. They abandon Valinor, they abandon grace, and on the way they spill kindred blood at Aqua Londe, slaying other elves to seize ships. This moment is a turning point, morally, spiritually, narratively. The elves, once the unblemished firstborn, are now complicit. The shadow has crept into them. Melkor has not corrupted them by force, but by provocation. He strikes once and lets pride do the rest. His genius lies not in domination, but in manipulation. The tragedy is complete. The elves become their own undoing. From this act comes the doom of the Noldor, a prophecy of exile, sorrow, and endless war. The brightest lights are not caught in a cycle of vengeance. Redemption will come, but only through deep suffering. And all the while another shadow watches, learning, waiting. His name is Sauron. He was once a Maiar of Orlais, the smith, a divine artisan, a master of order, of craft, of precision. Sauron valued structure and hierarchy. He saw the Valar's world as too wild, too inefficient. He wanted to improve it. That desire becomes the wedge. Under Melkor's influence, Sauron's love of order curdles into obsession. What was once a desire to shape becomes a need to control. Unlike Melkor, Sauron is not chaotic. He is methodical, patient, seductive. When Melkor tears down the world, Sauron wants to organize it. This is what makes him more dangerous. Melkor is a firestorm. Sauron is a machine. The first age of the world is a time of wonder and catastrophe, of legends half lost to time, of heroes who fought not for victory, but for the mere chance to resist. It is the great crescendo of Melkor's dominion, and the beginning of a long, slow decline into sorrow. But even in an age of ruin, something new begins. The elves may be the firstborn of Ilúvatar, but they are not the only children. In the twilight of the first age, another race awakens. Beneath a darkened sky in a world already marred by Melkor's touch, they are the Atani, the secondborn. We know them as men. Their coming is quiet, almost secret. They do not rise in splendor like the elves, nor do the Valar guide them at first. They awaken in the east, in the shadows outside the watchful care of the powers. And with them comes a mystery. Unlike elves, men are mortal, destined to die, to leave the world behind. This Ilúvatar calls their gift. To the elves see it as doom. Even the Valar do not understand it. Mortality is a design outside the music, a part of the stories hidden even from the Ainur. And in that mystery lies freedom. Tolkien imagines mortality not as punishment but as potential. Elves are bound to the world, men are not. Elves endure, men change. Where elves are shaped by fate, men have the power to reshape it. This difference is subtle but seismic. It means that men can act outside the pattern. They can add to the music in ways even the Ainur cannot predict. Not all men choose the light. Some fall under Morgoth's influence, corrupted by his lies, but others, brave and unbowed, enter the walls of Beleriand, choosing alliance with the elves. Chief among them are the House of Beor and the House of Hador, whose courage becomes the heart of many heroic tales. With their arrival, a new shape begins to form. The elves are no longer the sole actors. The world is beginning to turn towards mortals. The first age is not just a tale of elves and gods. It is the beginning of human inheritance and human suffering. Of all the stories in the first age, none is more beloved or more essential than the tale of Beren and Lúthien. Tolkien called it the kernel of his mythology, the story around which all others are shaped. It is a myth of love, yes, but also of courage, defiance, and the breaking of boundaries. Beren, a mortal man from the House of Beor, wanders into the forest of Doriath, wounded and hunted. There he sees Lúthien, daughter of Thingol, king of the elves. She is light made flesh, and Beren loves her at first sight. To win her hand, he is tasked with an impossible quest, to steal a Silmaril from the iron crown of Morgoth himself. This is not metaphor. This is a mortal man without hope, marching into the stronghold of a god, for love. And yet it is Lúthien who becomes the soul of the tale. She is not a prize to be won. She is not a damsel in a tower. She is the singer of fate, a figure of power, agency, and grace. She confronts Sauron and defeats him with her voice. She stands before Morgoth and sings them into sleep. Where power fails, song prevails. Where strength crumbles, beauty resists. Together, she and Beren achieve the unthinkable. They take the Silmaril, but the victory is not without cost. Beren is mortally wounded, and it is then that Lúthien makes a final choice. She chooses death to share his fate. She goes before Mandos, the doomsman of the Valar, and sings of the sorrow and love. And for the first and only time, Mandos is moved. He grants them a second life, a mortal one, and they return to the world, not in glory, but in peace, in quiet. The love does not conquer death, it chooses it. This tale matters not just for its beauty, but for its precedent. It is the first time in Tolkien's world that love transcends fate, the first time that death is not defeat, but a kind of victory, the first time that the elves must reckon with the mortal path, not as a curse but as a kind of gift. Beren and Lúthien live out their days in the forest, far from thrones and songs. The joy is finite, and therefore real. At last the Valar can bear silence no longer. The crimes of Morgoth, the ruin of Beleriand, moved them to open war. Across the western sea the host of Valinor marches, Maiar, Vanyar, and those Noldor who remained faithful. They are led by Eonwë, herald of Manwë, and they bring a brightness unseen since the trees still shone. What follows is the War of Wrath, a conflict so vast it redraws the map of the world. Dragons blacken the sky, Balrogs fall like meteors, whole mountain ranges split and drown. At length Morgoth's armies break, and the dark enemy himself is seized. His crown is made a collar, the Silmarils are torn from his brow. He is cast through the door of night into the void, beyond the circles of the world. But victory tastes of salt and ash, and in the smoking ruins Sauron slips away, unrepentant and unbound, carrying his master's legacy into the ages to come. Tolkien does not give us a clean restoration, he gives us a wounded triumph. The Valar win, yet paradise is not restored. The Silmarils are scattered, one in the sky, one in the sea, one consumed by fire. The greatest realms are lost, the Noldor bear the guilt of their oath, men carry the grief of centuries. The scars upon the land will never fully heal. This is a northern spirit, Tolkien so revered, the belief found in Norse sagas, that the right thing must be done, even when loss is certain. Heroism for Tolkien is measured not by whether the light prevails, but by how the heart endures when it does not. In the First Age every triumph is tempered, every victory bleeds, and every song ends in a minor key. Thus the First Age closes in silence rather than celebration, an echoing hush over drowned kingdoms and empty halls. History moves forward, but it moves on fractured foundations, and the shadow that falls over the Third Age is only possible because of what the First Age both won and lost. But the First Age ends not only in ruin, but also in mercy. To the Edain, the faithful among men who fought beside elves against Morgoth, the Valar offer a reward, an island raised from the sea, set between Middle-earth and Valinor. They call it Númenor, the land of the star. It is a place of marvel, green hills, deep harbors, fertile fields, and the sky close enough to touch. Its people are blessed with long life, great strength and wisdom, but not immortality. That gift is reserved for elves alone. This becomes the first and greatest test, whether the Númenóreans can hold abundance without grasping for eternity. But in the beginning they are noble. The first king is Elros, brother of Elrond, born of both elf and man. Elros chooses the path of mortality, and his rule is long and just, over 500 years. Under his line the island thrives. This is the golden age of Númenor. They become great shipwrights and sailors, building fleets that glide across the seas. Their friendship with the elves endures, and they sail often to Middle-earth. not to conquer but to heal. They share knowledge, raise cities, and hold the growing shadows at bay. But shadows gather in silence, and already pride begins to take root. The Númenóreans see the elves remain ageless. Their longer lives no longer feel like a blessing. They begin to measure them against eternity. The seeds of decline are sown in comparison. Envy masked as ambition, reverence curdling into resentment. While Númenor builds towers and fleets, another power stirs in Middle-earth. Sauron, having survived the fall of Morgoth, takes on a new form, one of beauty, wisdom, and persuasive charm. He raises fortresses in the east, most notably Barad-dûr, and begins to gather his strength again, but he knows he cannot match Númenor in open war. So when Ar-Pharazôn, the last king of Númenor, lands in Middle-earth with overwhelming force, Sauron surrenders, not in defeat but in strategy. He is taken to Númenor in chains. Within a few years, he becomes chief counselor to the king. From this position, he begins to corrupt from within. Sauron teaches a new gospel, that death is not a gift, but a curse, that the Valar have lied and that immortality can be stolen. He reintroduces the worship of Melkor, now cast as a misunderstood god of strength and liberation. Dark temples rise, human sacrifices begin, and fear becomes the foundation of power. Númenor shifts from a kingdom of light to a totalitarian theocracy, obsessed with death, control, and the illusion of godhood. What once was golden becomes hollow. Here Tolkien touches one of his deepest anxieties. The fear of death, when unacknowledged, becomes the root of tyranny. Númenor's fall is not simply political, it is spiritual. A culture that once sang the praises of life now digs its own grave, all in the name of escaping what it was never meant to conquer. And at the end, pride devours all wisdom. Ar-Pharazôn, now old and terrified of his own mortality, resolves to defy the very structure of the world. He gathers a massive armada, a fleet vast enough to darken the sea, and sails to Valinor, the undying lands, intending to claim immortality by force. This is the ultimate blasphemy, the invasion of the divine realm by mortal hands, and for one of the only times in Tolkien's legendarium, Ilúvatar himself intervenes. The island of Númenor is swallowed by the sea, along with its cities, temples and armies. Sauron's physical body is destroyed, though his spirit survives, now bound forever to the shape of a terrible shadow. The world, once flat, is made round. Valinor is removed, no longer reachable by mortal means. The straight path to the divine is now hidden, a road that no longer runs through water or wind. What began as reward ends in ruin, and yet, even in this drowning, there is survival. Not all Númenóreans bow to darkness. In hidden harbours and whispered gatherings, a remnant endured, known as the Faithful. They remained loyal to the Valar, reverent of Ilúvatar, and unshaken by Sauron's lies. The leader was Elendil, descended from noble bloods, and with him his sons Isildur and Anarion. As Ar-Pharazôn prepared his armada and Númenor rushed towards doom, the Faithful made ready. In secret they built ships. When the island fell, they sailed east across the storm-tossed sea, carrying with them the last light of Númenor. They brought more than bodies, they brought memory. The white tree, a symbol of hope and lineage. The Palantiri, the 7 seeing stones gifted by the elves. Scrolls of law, heirlooms of kingship, the tongues of the west. From these salvaged fragments they built anew. Elendil founded the kingdom of Arnor in the north. His sons raised Gondor in the south. These were not empires of domination, but outposts of resilience. Civilizations built on reverence, discipline, and their haunted wisdom. In the downfall of Númenor, Tolkien gives us not only a story, but a warning. He acknowledged the inspiration of Plato's Atlantis, a powerful island civilization undone by its own pride. But Tolkien's version is filtered through medieval, biblical, and mythopoetic lenses. This is not simply a cautionary tale about technological overreach, it is a lament for spiritual decay. Númenor is not destroyed by ambition alone, it is destroyed by forgetting. Forgetting gratitude, forgetting the sacred, forgetting that power without humility leads not to elevation but to collapse. Tolkien's Atlantis falls not when it becomes strong, but when it becomes afraid of death, afraid of limits, afraid of a world it can no longer control. That fear, once stoked, becomes cruelty, then blasphemy, and then ruin. The Cataclysm marks a turning point in the Legendarium, one of the only times Ilúvatar intervenes directly. The story reaches a metaphysical crisis, a moment so great that the divine must act. Afterwards, the world is changed not only in shape but in texture. The Third Age will feel more historical, more constrained. The divine grows distant, miracles become rarer, wonders fade into legend. Middle-earth becomes a world of relics, of memory, echo, and loss. But in the Second Age, having survived the fall of Númenor, Sauron re-emerges not as tyrant, but as teacher. He takes on a new name, Anatar, Lord of Gifts. Clothed in wisdom, fairness, and apparent humility, he approaches the elves of Eregion, a proud and ambitious realm of craftsmen and lawkeepers. They are under the leadership of Celebrimbor, grandson of Fëanor. The elves become his collaborators. Sauron teaches them secret arts, ancient knowledge of craftsmanship and enhancement, and together they begin to forge the rings of power. On the surface this is a marvel, but Sauron's intent is not generosity, it is dominion. In secret he returns to Mordor, raising Barad-dûr, and there he forges the One Ring, a Master Ring, bound to the fires of Mount Doom, in which he pours his will and malice. The One Ring is not a gift, it is a trap, crafted to control all the others, to enslave their wearers by linking their power to his own. This is Tolkien's ultimate betrayal, not through open conquest, but through collaboration turned poisonous. Knowledge becomes seduction, trust becomes weaponized. When Sauron first puts on the One Ring, the elves immediately perceive his intent. They feel the pull that attempt to seize their wills, and they recoil in horror. 3 elven rings are hidden, they are never touched by Sauron and thus remain uncontaminated. But even so, they are bound to the fate of the One. As long as the One Ring exists, their power is fragile, and their users vulnerable. Sauron responds with war. He sends his armies against Eregion, laying siege to the realm that once welcomed him. In the chaos, Celebrimbor is captured, tortured, and killed. His last act is to ensure that the 3 rings are dispersed beyond Sauron's reach, given to trusted guardians. But Eregion falls, its knowledge is lost, its forges go cold, and the dream of a peaceful Second Age begins to crumble. Do the elves resist? They cannot undo the work already done. The 7 and the 9 are out in the world, and Sauron is ready to claim them. The 9 rings were given to mortal kings, proud, ambitious, and eager for strength. In them Sauron found his most perfect victims. The rings prolonged life, enhance power, and reveal hidden things, but over time they consume the soul. The wearers fade, becoming wraiths, neither living nor dead, caught in the twilight state of servitude. They are called the Nazgûl, the ringwraiths, shadows of former kings, bound to the will of the One. This transformation is not a sudden fall, but a slow erosion, power paid in pieces of the self. The Nazgûl represent the purest realization of one of Tolkien's most haunting ideas, that enslavement doesn't always come by force. Sometimes it comes by desire. Sauron does not need to conquer them, he only needs to promise what they already want, and then take everything else away. The 9 rings are not just tools of control, they are mirrors. Each race sees its deepest flaw, reflected, and then consumed. The fires of Mordor flare and the free peoples rally. From Lindon marches Gil-galad, last High King of the Noldor. From Arnor and Gondor comes Elendil, tall and unbowed. Together they forge the last alliance of elves and men. A union born not of hope but of necessity. For 7 years they lay siege to Barad-dûr, until at last Sauron himself strides from the gates, a living furnace of malice. On the slopes of Orodruin, he duels the kings and fells them both. Gil-galad, burnt by the Dark Lord's hands, Elendil crushed beneath his great shield. Yet in that moment of ruin, Elendil's son, Isildur, picks up the shards of his father's sword. With a single stroke he severs the one ring from Sauron's hand. Power without its vessel collapses. Sauron's form withers, his spirits fleeing like smoke on the wind. On the battle plain, Elrond and Círdan urge Isildur to cast the ring into the fire. He cannot. Grief and sudden power are not together, and he claims it as Veregild for his father. In that decision, a heartbeat wrapped in centuries, the victory is already wounded. Months later, marching north to the Vale of Anduin, Isildur's company is ambushed near the Gladden Fields. He slips the ring upon his finger to escape, but the gold betrays him. It slides away, leaving him visible in the moonlit reeds. Orc arrows find their mark, and the heir of Elendil dies alone in the river. The ring sinks into a silt and shadow. It will sleep there for over 2,000 years, waiting for hands small enough to seem harmless. Sauron is disembodied yet not destroyed. The white tree still blooms in Minas Anor, yet its roots are watered with doubt. Every feast day, every crowning, echoes with the same unspoken question. Why did the kingdom finish what he began? Thus the third age opens under a pall of unfinished business. An age defined less by open war than by a spiritual bruise. The great kingdoms decline, stewardship gives way to vanity, and in forgotten corners the servants of the shadow plan for their master's return. In Tolkien's world, evil endures because the good falter, not from cowardice but from the ordinary failures of grief and pride. Power is never merely wielded, it is first welcomed or refused in the secret chambers of the heart. Isildur's choice hangs like a sword over all who follow, and somewhere deep beneath the current of the Anduin, a plain gold ring waits, patient as memory, certain as fate, for history to turn back toward it. But then, it is eventually found, not by kings or warriors, but by two humble river folk. One of them is named Digol, the other Smeagol. On the surface the encounter is simple. Digol discovers the ring while fishing, Smeagol sees it, wants it, and kills. But in that murder is the start of transformation, so slow it resembles decay. Smeagol retreats underground. Alone in the roots of the misty mountains he festers. He forgets the feel of sunlight. He forgets his name. He becomes a being called Gollum. What's most chilling is not how quickly it happens, but how gradually. He retains fragments of his former self, curiosity, fear, even a flick of conscience. He is not fully evil, he is divided, a self caught in a long argument with itself. Tolkien makes clear the ring doesn't corrupt all at once. It erodes, it isolates, it withers the soul strand by strand, until nothing remains but hunger. This duality, Gollum and Smeagol, the victim and the vessel, will echo across the story to come. In the vast sweep of Middle-earth's mythic history, of divine wars, immortal kings and fallen gods, the hobbits arrive almost as a joke. They are small, rural, peaceful. They love food, comforts, quiet. They have no interest in great powers and no claim on ancient thrones. They are, to all appearances, insignificant. And yet their very insignificance is what saves them. Tolkien did not originally conceive hobbits as part of his mythological framework, but once introduced they reshaped the tone of his legendarium. With them the grandeur of the first and second ages gives way to something smaller, but no less meaningful. The arrival of the hobbits mark a pivot in the myth, away from the battles and bloodlines and toward choices, toward conscience, toward the strength not of arms but of character. They are not heroic in spite of being small, they are heroic because they are small, and still capable of great things. And one such hobbit is Bilbo Baggins, who one day takes a step outside his door and finds himself beneath the misty mountains, and finds the ring. He does not know what it is. At that point in The Hobbit it is a curious object, a magic ring that grants invisibility, a tool for adventure, a trick for escape. But even then the shadows are stirring. Bilbo's encounter with Gollum is not just a riddle contest, it is a moment of moral weight. When Bilbo has the chance to kill his emaciated, unpredictable opponent, he chooses not to, out of pity, out of something unexplainable. That choice, seemingly small, will become everything. It is a hinge point for the fate of the world. Tolkien would later revise The Hobbit to align with his deeper mythic weight. What once read like a fairy tale whim now becomes a thread of doom. A hidden burden Bilbo unknowingly carries home in his pockets. The story becomes layered, light on the surface, but seeded with shadow. The Hobbit is not like the tales of the First Age. It is cheerful, a little absurd. There are trolls and singing goblins, dwarves arguing about breakfast. And yet beneath the songs and smoke rings, something ancient stirs. Tolkien allows the Hobbit to retain its warmth and whimsy, but he plants in the seeds of tragedy. He lets us laugh, but also listen. By the end, Bilbo returns changed, not ruined, but quieter, more aware. The story closes, but a new one has already begun. The ring has passed from one forgotten hand to another, and through these unassuming hobbits, the long defeat of the world begins to shift, just slightly, towards a new hope.